What's today about?
I think, first of all, it's great to be here and it's great to be with Maria and with Dennis. And I think all of you in the audience were really, really excited to hear, not excited to hear your struggles necessarily, but to learn what you're struggling with so that we can lean in and kind of, figure out what solutions we can share with each other. We always do our best learning from people who are in the field and dealing with students every day. At Kaplan, we have an interesting seat where we see nursing students from across the country and students of all levels, right? And so what we know is common to everyone this year is struggling with engagement, struggling with pandemic fatigue, struggling with, how are we a year into this? It was almost exactly a year ago that Dennis and I started doing these webinars for faculty. And it's hard to believe that it's gone by so slow and so fast at the same time. We never thought last year that we would be here a year later talking about many of the same issues, but from a position of experience and a position of, some issues being the same, some issues being new. And I think it'll be really exciting to kind of see how today unfolds and what we can learn.
That's awesome. I mean, yep, that's exactly what I was expecting. And we've got Carly in the house. We've got Kristen Smith in the house. We've got some others in the house. But Maria, please, Maria's our Executive Director of Nurse Consulting. Please let us know what you're looking forward to today.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Great to be here with my good friends, Kristen and Dennis. I'm really here to represent nursing. I am a nurse myself, as I hope some of you know, because I hope I've met some of you in my travels. But I really am here to learn from everyone and to share what I've learned. That to me is the big takeaway from today. We did not want this to be a PowerPoint presentation with us talking you through suggestions and tips. We really want this to be a dialogue to discuss our struggles, but also to discuss our achievements, because I know a lot of us have overcome and we can learn from one another. So that's really what I'm looking forward today, is just to be able to have a dialogue and really talk to our audience.
That's great. I mean, where do we start, right? There's so many things we could talk about. There are big changes coming from in terms of a big test change that's impending. We've got, I'm sure, a bunch of stressed out educators out there still dealing with exactly what both of you are talking about. But you both wrote a blog recently about transforming these engagement woes into wins. And if you have not read that yet, I will definitely put the link in the chat so that you can check that out and see in more detail. But where should we start? Can we jump right into engagement as an issue? It's something we can talk about. What do you guys think? What Chris and Maria, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that's the logical place to start, right? And the whole reason why we came together to kind of put our heads together around what we've learned, but also to source from you guys. What have you learned, and what advice do you have? Because there's a lot of things that we could talk about in terms of tech solutions or ways to construct your curriculum and ways to think about how you make everybody feel like they have an equal seat at the table, especially in those situations where you have some students that are synchronous and some that are asynchronous. And how do you work all of this together so that everybody feels seen? I think that for me is the biggest issue that seems to be persisting for the last year is sort of the social emotional, side of learning, where students need to be seen, need to feel accountable, right? That's one reason they don't, engage. There's not necessarily that accountability, or they are just overwhelmed and don't know how to lean in. And I think, how do we help our learners feel seen and supported as educators, especially as so many of our students are juggling life along with education and parenting through school that's still not fully in session and live. And, those issues that were first, kind of manifest last spring when the economy shut down are actually harder to juggle now when the economy's not, right? Not everybody is home anymore, and not everything is shut down the same way. And so it creates more disparity, I think, than when this first started, when everybody kind of just hunkered down. Now it's all over the place in terms of what the rules are and how do you roll with that as a student and as an educator to see all of your students. To me, that seems to be something that keeps bubbling to the top. And Maria, I don't know if you're hearing that sort of same thing and feeling that as well.
Absolutely. I've read study after study. Patricia Benner actually put out a study just in the past month, asking educators how they feel about engagement. And almost 90% of nurse educators said that they did not feel that their students were engaged in online learning. That's a problem, obviously. And you know, I think there are so many different ways that we can address it. We have to address it though. And I'm hoping that you guys maybe are typing in the chat some of the things that you've done. I want to say two things. Because we've gone online and a lot of us have gone to asynchronous learning, some of us sometimes think that maybe we don't need that synchronous learning at all, that, oh, well, we need to let these students do this on their own time. And I want to say that I think it's even more important that we have that face-to-face and have some dialogue with our students. So even if you have an asynchronous class, that doesn't mean that you can't have some synchronous moments. You know, even if it's just, we're not going to do a class, but we're going to have a little informal get together and we're going to have some dialogue. Maybe it's even doing your evaluation of a student synchronously so that you can see face to face and give them some feedback face to face. But let's not forget that we are social beings and we need this contact, and we need it now more than ever. And I'm just going to mention one other thing. Purpose is so important right now. And by purpose, I mean every activity that we have students doing, every assignment that we have for a student, we need to be explicit in the purpose for those activities and assignments. Why is it important that you do this? In other words, I'm not just throwing something on a piece of paper and giving it to you and saying, go have at it, turn it back into me electronically. I'll send you a few notes and we're done. They need to understand why that activity, why that assignment is important. And we need to be explicit about that. And I think now more than ever, tell them why they're doing this and connect it to your objectives. Be sure that everything that a student is doing is connected to their objectives, because if it's not, then there is no purpose for them to be doing it. We've got to stick to those objectives. So those are just a couple of things that I think are really important with engagement, especially online engagement. And again, I'll turn it back over to Chris and also hope that there's some chat going on.
Yeah. I haven't heard anything as of yet, but would love if the audience could just chime in, let us know what your tips are. And Maria, what you're saying makes total sense to me. It's something that I've seen this past year so many times. I'll use some slightly different words. I think you probably said it better. But the first situation of just making sure we understand the value of being synchronous. I've seen so many students go out of their way to support each other in a way that I had not seen in the previous decade of working online. And maybe it's because they're not getting it from the places they usually get it in terms of the kind of emotional support and just I guess students recognizing that we're all in a tough spot together and that we're going to need to work together to get out of it. And more, this is, I would say students usually came online in an online classroom, didn't want anything to do with any of the other students and would leave after the session was over. Now we're hearing, hey, who wants to get together as a study group? Who wants to connect? Who wants to build community? And so, so many times it's uplifting, but at the same time, it kind of lends itself to exactly what you're talking about, the desire for students to be together, to work together to make this happen. And then to your second point, it's this idea of motivation, right? It's this idea of why does this matter? In a world where you may be questioning why any of this matters, if you have that purpose that you're talking about, I've seen the outcomes from students be so much stronger in terms of not only them completing the actual activity, but also taking away from it as well. And I'm sure, Chris, you've got a lot to say from you've always got the science and the learning science behind it, but that's definitely something I've been seeing all throughout for sure.
Yeah, I think, one of the things we wrote about it in the blog, we've talked about it on countless webinars at this point, is sort of creating that safe space for students online where Dennis and I were just talking about, Zoom versus, Adobe, where you have students on camera versus not. And, not just assuming that when students are on camera that they're checked in and they're engaged, that it can be an easy proxy to say, oh, I've got everybody on camera, we've got to be good. But there's more research coming out now, where when you're on camera, people are looking at your background and they're checking out, Dennis's plants and his books, like what's he reading on his bookshelf. And, and that takes up cognitive load, right? And so our students are working a little extra hard when they're on camera sometimes, and you have the disparity of where they're logging in from. We know we have students who have access when they're on campus and not great internet access at home, or their living conditions aren't what they want to show, or their kids are doing schooling and they're running around in the back, or we know that we have students that log in from cars, parked outside of libraries with free Wi-Fi, and we want to be sure that we're being cognizant of supporting students in all of their environments and making them still feel seen. So one of the best takeaways that I think we've heard consistently is having a poll that opens up when you first open your synchronous classroom and asking students just for a private check-in, not something that everybody sees, but just you as the instructor to make sure that they're okay. When you're in a lecture hall or in a classroom or a lab, you can get a full picture of how a student is doing, and your mind kind of picks up on all those cues. On camera, you can't do that. And your brain gets tired trying to figure out what it's missing for information and piecing together, how somebody really is when you're looking at them, on a camera, which is just not the same. And so to take place of that and let your brain have a little break, just ask them the question and create a safe space that you dialogue with them. How are you? Are you ready to learn today? Or, what's one takeaway that you have? Or how are you feeling about leaning in today? I think, some of those personal connections that we struggle to make online, they've persisted, right? It was awkward at first, but everybody was kind of struggling. And I think, because of the disparity now with who can do what and what's open and, what's where, it's a little different. And I think, that check-in becomes even more important when things aren't all the same level of stress, in each community. But it's safe to say that our students are all feeling some level of stress, and being able to check in and be that safe space as an educator, that you probably part of the reason you're an educator, right? And especially a nurse educator, is that you want to lean in and help your students take the next step. And so sometimes creating that safe space online can be, a really good tip to kind of just have that, set up that private dialogue, especially when you haven't met them in person, or not as frequently as you would like.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And some quick shout outs. Guest 6280, who I believe is our very own Kristen Smith, says that the human connection in learning is vital. We've got a question, a comment, I guess, from Dan Smith, who says that, I found that students lose focus, and I feel that I'm the only one talking, right? For synchronous lectures, I found it beneficial for students to assemble and present a PowerPoint covering the chapter we're discussing. A couple folks mentioned online discussions and just this need to cut. I guess I see connection coming up over and over again. What is it about? Is that something we should talk about a little bit more? Human connection. Are there ways to make that happen online in a way that is purposeful, or more intentional? Maybe that's another way to put it.
Yeah, I'll mention a couple of things, because obviously it is a hot topic. And I hate to use this word, but I'm going to say that sometimes we almost have to force the students to collaborate. I think they want to, but they don't always take the initiative to. And so one of the things that we as instructors need to be sure that we do is we need to facilitate that collaboration with the students, whether it is synchronous or that they're doing it on their own. But we can have breakout rooms when we're meeting with students synchronously and have them break into small groups, and that develops a better rapport and connection with those students. Also, you can include group work and have them get together synchronously and work on projects. Also, things like Google Docs, have the students collaborate on Google Docs and Google presentations. But we can incorporate that into our course. The other thing, this is really small, but I find it to be significant. as an instructor, when you're putting together a course and maybe you're making an assignment or you just want to give a little feedback, actually make a recording of yourself instead of typing in, in a chat room or sending a message. Make a recording, and make a recording in your house or outside as you're walking. Let them see that you're a real person with a real life. That's part of making a connection, is them to get to know you a little bit. I can't tell you that I used to do this. I would make an assignment and I would do a 2-minute video. Here's your assignment. Here's what you do. Here's when it's due, so on and so forth. I remember one time I was making that assignment, and I'm a cat lover and I have cats. And one of my cats jumped up in front of the camera while I was making my recording. And of course, I immediately stopped and I thought, oh no, now I've got to start all over. And you know what? I said, you know what? No, I'm not. I'm not going to start over. That's part of life. I'm going to post it just as is. Do you know, I had more people ask me about my cat and my life after I posted that video. I was a totally different person to them at that point. I was no longer, Dr. Harris, the instructor. I was the lady with the cute little cat, and I want to know all about the cat, So I kid, but those types of interruptions, those real life experiences, add to the connection with your students.
It makes so much sense, right? And in fact, I think a lot of students come into a classroom with like this social norm or this idea that they're in a big lecture hall and the teacher's the only one doing the talking, right? And like you said, we have to force them to break that conception. We need to facilitate, to make sure that students understand how they're supposed to participate. Either it's through what Dan did with the presentations through the PowerPoint, or it's through, you took the words right out of Rowena, I hope I'm saying that name right, Rowena's mouth. Rowena said, let's put them, in breakout groups of 4 to 5 so they can dialogue and faculty check in. Carly loved your idea, Chris, about the check-in, to implement that. In fact, Chris, you've said to me so many times, seeing a student doesn't mean visually. No more, right? Like there's so many ways to see a student and see how you can support them in an individual way. And that's something I just remind myself all the time when I'm in the classroom, that like I can't rely on those visual cues anymore. In fact, it's made me realize even more so how that was the wrong way to approach a classroom, that there's so many ways you can check in and learn about your students as you're teaching. But definitely and just one more thing before I toss it back to both of you. Audrey talked about these coffee shops. We teach the students some self-care activities, break out into small groups, and they love the chance to connect with each other and faculty. We had bring your pet to class day. And again, it kind of lends itself to this like genuine authenticity that I think is we're missing it. And the more we can show it, the better. But anyway, Chris, I'm sure there's a lot of thoughts going through your head, so please.
Yeah, I think the more they see us as human and safe space and relatable, the more likely they are to engage in an authentic way. And gaining buy-in from your students isn't, always about checking the boxes on an assignment or, you need them to trust you, that you're guiding them on the pathway that's going to lead to their career. And because so many nursing students are adult learners too, right? They're juggling multiple things. And so to Maria's point about learning objectives, and the why, which is like the solid adult learning andragogical thing that distinguishes it from pedagogy, right? When they're kids, you tell them what to do because you're the authority figure, and they trust that you're going to tell them where they, what they need to do. But as an adult, there's so many things competing in their brain, and even more so in this last year. How do you get them to really trust that this is important? Tell them what this is going to do for them and why it matters, and how it builds. I think we've talked a little bit about academic integrity too, Maria, and I think some of that it can be helped by understanding the why, right? Cheating your way through exams in nursing school is not going to help you be a better nurse. You may pass the next assessment, right? You may not own it, but you pass it. But then you're struggling with the fact that you never learned that content, and it just snowballs out of control. And so trying to figure out the time management techniques and how to solve some of those issues that are present in their lives, starts with them trusting you that you're not judging them for being a working parent that's also trying to go to nursing school. You want to help, him see how to juggle those things and still be a successful professional when he's done at the end of nursing school, right? So I think, academic integrity, falls in under a little bit under engagement. It falls in under a little bit of, holy cow, I'm in nursing school during a pandemic and I don't know anybody, I don't know where to turn. That it all kind of comes around together to like this relationship of trusting, leaning in, engaging, doing the right thing because it leads to the right purpose. And that's why I'm in nursing school in the first place. I don't know, Maria, what, I know you have a lot of thoughts about academic integrity and how that all kind of goes hand in glove. I'd love to hear.
Gosh, we're getting there already, huh? We're going there.
I think so.
Yeah, go ahead, Maria. Yeah.
We don't have to, Dennis, because this is kind of my wheelhouse. So I'll get going and I might not shut up.
Okay, let me take a brief pause here and just say, hey, we're already 23 minutes in. Time is flying. We're getting the participation that I think we knew we would get from the nursing community. I think anytime we do one of these, folks are always chiming in, sharing ideas. And so I do want to just shout out a few folks who have thrown in some ideas here. Guest 4540 talked about a modified flipped classroom modality, voiceover PowerPoints that they're posted for students. And then they come in and they have a quick quiz on the PowerPoint, discuss rationale. Then they do an interactive activity like a Jeopardy or Kahoot, and students respond really well to it. And then I think, something I do want to point out, something maybe we can touch upon later. Our guest, MJ, M. Johannesson, says that taking time to allow students to be involved takes time in capitals, right? And we've talked about it a ton, right? So pre-planning of letting go can really, really help facilitate and make your lesson work the way it is. So I think we do want to dive into more woes. I do want to definitely talk about integrity because I know that's something that we're all stressing about at one point or another. So I will just summarize and say, we started touching upon engagement, and maybe the takeaways I want you to have is just remember human connection, authenticity, being yourself, not being the sage on the stage, not being the professor who is infallible, but instead showing yourself and being, willing to be vulnerable can go a long way to making your students feel comfortable. And then being purposeful with your activities, helping students break past social norms of 2019 or whenever it was, and realize that this is a new ballgame, that they can contribute, that they can get involved and engage in a different way, new, different, I think different is just the best word to use. And then lastly, as Chris said, safe space. Just remember to remind them this is really a place where we're going to come to learn, we're going to come to contribute more than ever. Learning takes center stage, and hopefully we can just keep reminding students of that. That being said, there are definitely challenges along the way. One you just alluded to, and I'm sure is on folks' minds. So please chime in the chat if this is something on your mind as well. Academic misconduct as the general topic. We definitely wanted to touch upon that today. Maria, I know this is your wheelhouse, so please, what are we dealing with here?
I'll try to be brief. Before we move to that, I want to say one thing to M. Johansson's point. To get engagement, we have to give engagement. That's just, that stays with me when I'm doing any kind of presentation. I've got to be engaged in this, and I've got to show people that I'm engaged in this. And I feel like if I do that, I'm going to get, the engagement back. So just wanted to say that, and we will move on to the woes. Unfortunately, again, the studies are showing that academic misconduct is on the rise during the pandemic. I don't think anyone is surprised by that. It's just too tempting when no one is watching to make things a little easier. Now, let me say this first. Academic misconduct most often occurs because a student is pressed for time, waited to the last minute, and they've just got to get it done. It also occurs because they don't understand the importance of the assignment that they've been given. it doesn't occur because people are bad and they just want to cheat. That's not usually why students cheat. So let me say that first. Secondly, because of the reasons that students cheat, a lot of the things that we've already talked about in this webinar are the very things that you can do to prevent cheating. And our focus really should be on prevention and not so much detection. Now, I'm not saying that you ignore detection. Of course, you want some detection because you want students to know that you care, that it's important. But we really want to focus on the prevention. And what's the prevention? I will try not to get on my soapbox, and I'm just going to mention a couple of things here. I'm going to go back to purpose. Purpose is very important. Students have to understand that this activity that you gave me is important to my learning and my becoming a professional nurse. I have to know this information to take care of a patient so that I don't kill a patient. That's what we have to do in nursing. We have to tie this to patient care. That's very important. Secondly, I will say that with academic misconduct, we can scaffold our assignments. Scaffolding does a lot of things, but one of the things that it does is it almost forces, again, I use that word that I don't like to use, a student to engage in that activity, in that assignment over time, so that they can't wait till the last minute, which is one of the reasons that they cheat. And also, they're getting feedback, hopefully, as they're scaffolding this assignment, they're getting feedback throughout the entire process so that they can improve and actually get better when it's finally time to turn in that assignment. Or even test, guys. This does apply to test. It can't all be summative evaluation. We've got to have some formative evaluation. We've got to have some quizzing. We've got to give them some feedback and help them understand the big concept and putting it all together so that when they do get to that summative evaluation, they've got it and they're not stressed out about it. So I'll stop there. I'm hoping that you guys are maybe again doing some chatting there, but those are two very important things is purpose. And then really, I'm going to say scaffolding is about the formative assessment and giving that feedback along the way to the student to get them to understand the purpose and get better. And I do have to say this, I have to channel my mentor, Barbara Irwin. If any of you have been with Kaplan for a while, you've probably heard her talk about self-efficacy, Bandura's self-efficacy. It is so important for students to believe that they can do and that they can do better. And part of scaffolding will give students the feedback that they need to improve over time and improve their self-efficacy, because students have to have that belief that they can do better if they're going to do better. And I will stop there and turn it over to Kristen.
Yeah, and I think, you're right. The way we can make students lean in is make it matter, show them how it fits into the bigger piece of the puzzle. And we also have to get creative, right? I think, sometimes it's easy to assign multiple choice questions because online seems so well suited for that, right? You just answer the boxes, scores itself when you have it loaded in. That's pretty great as an educator. It saves time. But what it doesn't do is really provide a lot of insight into how your students are thinking, unless you're really, really preparing ahead of time. And those questions are multi-level and really, you can have pages and pages of work that then lead up to a bubble answer. But it's that thought process that you really want to be sure is going right, especially as we look at next generation nursing, right? The NGN, which is focused on clinical decision making and judgment. And how do you make sure that what's going on between their ears is what should be going on, right? And that they're following the right pathway to get to the right answer, and they're not just guessing their way through on a multiple choice test. And I know one thing that we talk a lot about is reflection, right? Why did you do this? Why did you make this decision? What is the outcome of this decision? And what happens if you choose this instead? And those sorts of leading questions are much harder to grade as an educator, but you learn so much more about the process your student is going through. And while you can't always do that all the time, especially when you have large classes, I think being able to sprinkle that in throughout the curriculum to really gauge and to have students know that you're going to call them on that, that you want them to learn to be critical thinkers, because that's going to make them a better nurse. Being a better nurse is going to make them feel more confident day to day. It's going to help them in their career. It's going to help them with all sorts of things. And building that confidence, that self-efficacy, that belief that I can see myself being a professional nurse. I see myself going back to school. I see myself specializing, becoming an advanced practice nurse. All of those things that are so beautiful about nursing as a career start with undergraduate nursing, and sort of the belief that I can get through this next exam, and that the information that I'm learning now is going to pay dividends over a lifetime. And I think, the more you tie that into the big picture, that sort of, that noble purpose, and the reasons that you want a career in nursing, I think that hones back to them. We know that students still struggle, though. I saw a question come through in the chat that faculty still have trouble getting their students to do the preparation. And Maria, I'd love to hear you a little bit about some of the ways that you layer in your classroom. I'm assigning them things like videos, supplemental guides, completing sections and reading. How do you do that, without going way overboard, especially in flipped classroom, right? They have to do that to come in to be able to engage. So how do you make it more interesting for students to want to do the preparation?
No, here's a novel idea. Give students a choice. In other words, can they read their textbook, or can they watch a podcast? Either or, not both. Give them a choice in and not only how they prepare for class, but then maybe how you evaluate them. Is it a written assignment? Could it be a project? Could it be a video? This was in my doctorate program, we were asked to put together a project, and we were asked to put it in writing. And I don't know what got into me, because I'm usually a rule follower, but I just felt like the project lended itself to being on video, because it was something personal. It was about your personal mission and why I was doing this and that sort of thing. And I just felt like that would come across more genuine in a video where someone could see. And I turned it in as a video, and I thought, either I'm going to get a 0 or it'll go okay. The instructor loved it, and she said, I should have given you the choice to do this. So choice is a big deal, allowing the students to have some choice maybe in how they come to prepared. And then that's kind of the fun thing, is giving them the choice. The not so fun thing is accountability. If we tell students that they have to do something to come in prepared for class, then we have to hold them accountable. And going back to what a guest said about their modified flipped classroom, and that they require the students to take a quick quiz before they come in, or not before they come in, but as they come in, you know what? Have them take that quiz. And if they are not able to reach the benchmark that you want, then maybe they have to do a different assignment, or maybe they don't even get to come to class. I know some schools that have done that have said that if you don't come prepared for my classroom, then you can't come into class. It usually only takes once for a student to be turned away for them to learn that they need to come. I don't like to, necessarily take that approach, but at some point you will have to hold the students accountable. But maybe if you're giving students more choices and they're doing something that's more enjoyable, then maybe they're more apt to come to class prepared.
I really like that. And just a comment just came in from guest 5765 that they created a tic-tac-toe board with assignments in each box. And students had to complete 3 in a row to finish. And I love that gamification aspect of that. And this day and age, I think the choice is an incredible idea, in the sense that, like, you don't have to have everything submitted. You can submit things digitally now. And there's so many ways to express yourself in today's world of TikTok. Or I think students are, arguably more comfortable expressing themselves in a video format at times. I mean, this is probably not true across the board, but more and more, I think students are used to communicating in other ways rather than just the written word, or and there's always that backdrop of test anxiety, right? And I do at some point want to get to the impending test change, because I'm sure that's in the back of some folks' minds, right? Yeah, I mean, please, if you have other thoughts, audience, please chime in. If you have questions, please chime in. I love that idea. Another question that came up, let me pause it. Chris, did you want to jump in on that topic further, or? Okay, so another topic that came in was a guest mentioned that they have to keep their students with their cameras off. And sometimes we get cameras off regardless of our policy or whatever we need to do. And Chris, you mentioned this briefly earlier, how there's a divide almost that's being created between students with their cameras on and cameras off, right? Can we talk briefly about how to maybe bridge that, or how to bring the students who may be camera off, whether unwillingly or not, into the fold? What are some other ways? And I know we touched on like the check-in, but maybe we can talk about that a little bit further.
Yeah, and Dennis, I'm going to actually turn it back on you in a minute, because you spend as much time in an online classroom as anybody that I know. And I think, we at Kaplan have experimented with on-camera, off-camera. We've done a lot, and Dennis is modest to say that he's pitching it to us, because he is actually one of our lead sort of experimenters and trying to gauge student data and engagement based on camera usage and chat participation and all of those things. And what we learn a lot is about that sort of seeing and not seeing, right? So you don't necessarily need a camera to make sure your students are engaging. But again, like a lot of these strategies, it requires preparation. And, having taught in a live classroom, there is that opportunity where I've definitely had it happen, and maybe you have too, where you didn't prepare as much as you wanted to, but all the content, and you still went in there and you delivered a great lecture, and it was totally okay. And you could let your students fill up some of the time with their questions, and you answered them, and it was okay. That doesn't really work online in the same way. It just doesn't. And I think, the preparation need to create a really good online experience is more than people give it credit for. And I think all of us know that now, right? Where a lot of the solutions are, well, if they're off camera, that's okay. Use more polling, use more chat. If you can possibly have a TA, like we do today, which is fantastic. We have somebody moderating the chat for us to be sure that we don't miss important concepts. That's an amazing gift as an educator, as a presenter, is to have somebody kind of moderating that and making sure students are seen. We are fortunate that we are able to staff up with a ratio of TAs per student count, so that we make sure that all of our students are engaging. And what that does for us is it allows students who are nervous about engaging, or who are shy or feel unprepared, they can privately chat with our TAs and be sure that they get their questions answered, during the live lecture while the on-camera teacher is going on. We kind of pull them off to the side, make sure they're good, and then like kind of dump them back in, merge them back onto the highway, if you will, when they're ready. And I think, that's a real luxury that we have at being an at-scale operation. But what we've learned from that is that we didn't need to see them to be sure that they were okay. And we didn't need to see to, check in. What we needed was a regular source of communication and accountability and engagement opportunities for them, where we weren't just talking at them, and going on and on, that we cut out all of the stuff that is nice to know and give them all of the need to know stuff, and then give them an opportunity as quick as possible to use it. Dr. Barbara Oakley is a leading authority in sort of the neuroscience and learning out of Canada now. And one of the things that she said is that it's academic malpractice for you to talk to a student or lecture them and give them information for more than 15 minutes without giving them an opportunity to use it. Ask them to put in the chat their answers, ask them to vote, ask them to pick a silly character, like mix it up, make it so that they have to like hunt for something, make them have to use the interface that your, whatever browser you're using, whatever your platform, they all have different interactive tools, and get familiar with them and use them, and make the students have to figure it out. They probably already know, but give them the opportunity to use their knowledge in unique ways and make sure that they do it. I think that's probably the best takeaway that I have. But Dennis, you have things to color in here.
All right, I'll color it. You always solve all my problems, and most of my, all the credit to you to kind of lead the way in terms of how we teach. But I guess what I'll add to that, just as food for thought, is there are a lot of tools out there, and as you use the tools, think about which of those tools gives back to the student. And what I mean by that is, you're asking a lot from our students today, right? We ask them to be on camera. We ask them to engage in this strange way. And we ask them to type into polls or type in or chat in, things that they might normally not do in a regular in-person classroom. A lot of times they might expect to sit there, not be bothered, be passive and soak it all in and go home. But I guess what I try to think about is, well, one, every classroom is different, right? I'm sure you all know that, like there's some classes where you can literally have like an image on the screen and talk for hours and everyone's engaged and timing in and talking. And there's some classrooms, no matter what you do, they're not going to want to be a part of that discussion. For the latter, most of the classes that I teach actually have no students on camera. That's because of the size and the scale. And so how we are able to give students that individual attention is by having those off-camera instructors, the experts who are behind the scenes, like Julie, who's in the chat here, type to each of the students and make sure that they're individually connected and individually engaged through chat so they can have that kind of discussion that Chris is talking about. Now, that's not always possible either, right? There are going to be times when I'm running solo and I just don't have the folks in the classroom to be able to help me facilitate in that individual way. In those situations where I'm lacking that engagement, I'll turn to tools that, again, what I said earlier, gives back to the student. In other words, shows the students their efforts. It's not just clicking a button and sending a response to the void, but using tools like Kahoot that are more collaborative, or even using things like Flipgrid. I don't know how many of you have used that, but what it is it allows, you just share the screen. It allows students to create little Post-its, and you can create little sections to cast their vote or share their thoughts. And it really gets the students realizing that they're not in this alone, right? They're part of a classroom environment, a safe classroom environment where they can be engaged in this conversation, this purposeful discussion of the topics they need to work through. And I guess the advice I'll give you is there is no one right answer. I'm always seeking that the perfect, way to get your class engaged. Honestly, it doesn't exist, right? And that's why we're here today discussing all the different ways you can make it happen. You have to find a way that resonates with you personally. As Maria said earlier, if you're engaged, your students will sense that and they'll be more willing to get a part of the action as well. So find the thing that really feels genuine to you, feels like something that you can really do naturally. I mean, naturally may be the wrong word. You're going to have to push yourself to do whatever it is you do because it's different, but find a way that you can connect with whatever you're trying to accomplish and don't give up right away. I've had so many times when the first time I tried a new activity, I got crickets, but it ended up being the student's favorite by the end of, our time together. So don't give up. It may feel different at first again, but, try to, just keep at it. And if you're here, you're already doing that. So kudos to you. And I just want to remind you, you're doing an amazing job working through all this. Okay, last thing I'll say is keep it simple, right? Don't try to get crazy. Be prepared to be your own technical support live. So be comfortable, whatever you're working, have a backup plan, but it's the smallest things that students will appreciate. And being on camera is not honestly, I don't need that, right? And you don't need that. We can really be able to connect with students in different ways other than just trying to replicate what we had before. There's so many tools out there for that collaboration. So please, anyway, Maria, I'm sure you have other thoughts here. This is not about me. This is about you two. You two are the experts here and the stars. But yeah.
This is about everybody. So please feel free to continue, or maybe we had some chat that we wanted to share.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're doing my job. It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely comments coming in. I love, just one guest 5765 said they love Flipgrid. Intermittent gamification really keeps things engaging. Worldwall.net free templates. They have spin wheels there. I love that. We should check it out for sure. And Elizabeth says, thank you for the wonderful information. Okay. It is 5:46. I'll go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
I was just going to say, you touched on this very briefly and kept going. But when you're learning to use a new tool, realize that you are tech support for that tool. So when you're using it, be sure that you go to the website of the tool and that you look at what they have for onboarding information for learning how to use it, and that you dress rehearse it before you use it with your class. Not that any of us have learned that the hard way, but yeah, so my family is my set of guinea pigs, right? And this is a new tool. This is what I'm trying to use. Can you see if you can log in and answer this poll question using poll everywhere, or any of the other tools that are out there, and seeing if it actually works. Make sure you know where to anticipate the problems. And something that I've taken to doing, but I'm an instructional designer by training, right? So I go through and I take screenshots as I'm learning a new tool so that I can figure out where the problems are, so I can tell other people that'll come behind me, right? And I just kind of natively do that now because I've been burned so often. So yeah, anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there, that you are tech support. So just be careful. Don't throw everything at it at once. So like, learn something deeply, if you like it, as opposed to trying to sample across the board, because there's too much out there now. So much of it is free now, which is great, but it also can be like drinking from a fire hose, which isn't always as productive as it could be.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. Okay, we've got about 12 minutes to go. I did want to kind of circle back to that impending cloud that I keep feeling I hear coming up in discussions, which is that impending test change. Can we talk about that a little bit, and the implications, and how can we prepare? Either of you can, Maria, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. This is another hour discussion, but I promise I won't go for an hour. For you nurses, I do realize there are probably people on this webinar that are not nurses. So we're going to talk a little nursing talk here for just a few minutes. But for us nurses, we have the next gen NCLEX that is looming. April 2023 is when we're expecting the change. And the change is all about clinical judgment. So really, come on, guys, it's not really a change. We've been teaching clinical judgment. We maybe haven't been testing or evaluating our students in the way that NCLEX is going to, but we've been teaching it. So just a few things here. I think we have to, number one, keep our wits about us and say, how do you eat a hippopotamus? One bite at a time, right? Okay, so we've got to take it one step at a time. We need to introduce the clinical judgment measurement model, and we need to introduce the terminology that goes along with that. Well, step one of the clinical judgment measurement model, guys, is recognize cues. Any of us, whether we're in nursing or not, can put this in an everyday scenario. What do we mean by recognize cues? Well, for those of us that aren't in nursing, you're sitting at home and your kids are in the background, and you hear lots of noise and commotion, and then all of a sudden it's silent. What do? We start recognizing cues, right? Okay, do I hear anything? Do I hear one of my children, all of my children? Where are the sounds coming from, or where are they not coming from? You go open a door, you start looking, are my kids alive? What's going on? Those are all recognizing cues. And what I'm getting at here is we introduce the model in first, and then we start talking about the model as a whole and how this relates to clinical judgment. Clinical judgment is what we all have to take care of a patient at the bedside. That is the clinical decisions that we make to keep our patients safe or to make our patients better. And that's what we're all working towards. So when we talk about next gen NCLEX, we're talking about clinical judgment. What do we do to change our curriculum? Again, introduce the model. And one of the best ways to prepare our students is with unfolding case studies and virtual simulation. And it's virtual. We can use it virtually. And let me just say this. Yes, you can assign it to students. You can have them collaborate and work in small groups on it. But one thing I guess I want us to do as nurse educators is I want us to also use virtual simulation as an opportunity to role model what it is to be a professional nurse who has clinical judgment. So take one of your virtual simulation cases and walk through it with your students in a synchronous environment. Or you could even record it if you need to and send the recording. But we need to take the opportunity to role model what it looks like to take care of a patient. And let me just say, this should be part of our class. You remember Patricia Benner back in 2010 in her book, Radical Transformation, Educating Nurses, said back then, we've got to bring clinical into the classroom. That classroom is where our problem is, right? We're not doing a good job in the classroom. Why? Because we're not relating the classroom to clinical, to real life. And that's what we have to do. Remember, we're educating nurses, we're educating healthcare professionals. They need to understand that everything we're doing in the classroom is related to patient care. This is important. You got to know it. And virtual simulation is a great way for them to learn clinical judgment, for them to be able to make mistakes, and also for us to role model that behavior. And finally, I will say this. Kristen mentioned self-reflection. That is key to learning. Reflection is key to learning. Remember that a reflection allows you to retrieve information. It allows you to elaborate. That's connecting old to new. And it also allows you to generate, in other words, put things into your own words so that you can understand them. That those are all learning science principles that Kristen knows much, much more about than I do. So I'm going to shut up now, but I just want to say, don't forget that self-reflection piece, because that is so important.
Yeah, I don't know that it's accurate that I know tons more than my colleague here. I think it is so valuable to think about remediating in an applied way, right? And it's also a fantastic way to evaluate your student thinking, right? Because you're watching them step by step. I think what we don't always do a good job of is debriefing and really telling the student where they sort of fell off the wagon, so to speak, in their thinking process. And so by having the recording of you showing what a compassionate and professional nurse does, that's going to model that for them. It does harken back to a learning science principle of worked examples, right? Where you do a step and you tell them why, and you do the next thing and you say why. So it's not just doing it sort of in a vacuum, but you're doing it with the process, with the purpose of showing what's going on in your head, like what you're thinking about, what you're picking up on, and how that translates into student learning, right? And to student behavior change, which is the definition of learning that we most like at Kaplan, that their behavior is different after this intervention because you've corrected something, or they've learned something and they've attached it to a prior memory, or they understand what difference it makes, so they're going to do it moving forward. Another way that applied worked examples is used is where there's an error in there and you have students go through and watch it and figure out what the error was, which is an interesting way to think about in nursing as well. It's good for them to be able to pick up on mistakes too, right? That happens, and being able to go back and identify those things is equally critical. That's great, Maria. I think Next Gen gets a rap of making people anxious, but I think anytime there's a test change, it's an opportunity to rethink what we do and why, and how to make it better for educators and for students. I think we're really fortunate at Kaplan that we've long held a thinking model for our students in NCLEX and have taught them to think their way through the test and not to memorize things. And we're really excited about having the opportunity to adjust our curriculum and our item types to match the new ones to really expose that thinking pattern and that clinical judgment model and how they fit so nicely together. And it's an exciting opportunity for us, for all of us.
I think the way you framed it is exactly right. In that in these times, we may have these woes, but we can use those woes to, again, to do our own self-reflection, I guess, of our own delivery, of our own curriculum, of our own content, and figure out if we're delivering to students the same things that they need in today's world. And it's going to be different, right? And so with 4 minutes to go, I do want to give both of you time to get in some final thoughts. So, this is really the only thing I'm going to remember after all this anyway. So this is, you better think of something good. But I will just summarize the last half hour or so. We talked about scaffolding, right? Getting past academic misconduct by thinking about, how you're testing the students on the material in a different way, either through choice or through gamification, right? We talked about The need for simulation, bringing the clinical into the classroom. It ties all back to what Maria's been saying all throughout this hour together. This need to be purposeful, this need to connect what you're teaching to what matters, why they're learning it. Work examples is a great way. Role modeling is a great way. Guys, I've been taking notes. Not bad, right? And then just remembering again how important it is for students to have that self-reflection, right? For those three reasons: to retrieve, to elaborate, and to generate, right? So, you know, if there's anything you leave from all this, I guess my parting words would be just be flexible. You're already doing amazing. Don't be too hard on yourself. I know as teachers, we tend to do that, and just know that, you know, just be flexible, try new things. You're here because you want new ideas, and that's fantastic. And at the end of the day, just again, be genuine and find something that works for you. So, and just know that there is no perfect answer to that. That being said, if there is a perfect answer, Maria and Chris are going to be the closest to it. So, you know, whoever, Maria, maybe we start with you with some final thoughts for this audience.
Sure, I would love to go and let Kristen have the last word. I just want to say that I'm actually going to finish by kind of tagging onto a comment that's in the chat here. Guest 3649 said that one of the biggest components missing since the pandemic is the limited ability to role model. And I that is so true. That is so true. So I want to just kind of tag onto that and say we can still role model, though. We don't have to be on camera. We don't even have to be, you know, face to face to role model. Talk about academic integrity. Talk about how important it is, especially to the healthcare profession and to nursing. Remember, nursing is the #1 trusted profession for what, like 17 years in a row or something ridiculous. People trust nurses, and we need to talk about that and how important that is. And that's part of our role modeling. And finally, I'll say, let's not forget about bringing those patients into the classroom and role modeling, taking care of those patients, even if it is virtually. To me, that is a great place to learn, because virtual simulation allows the students time to sit and think about what they're doing. It's not, you know, in the clinical where the instructor's standing over you going, okay, what do you do next? What do you do next? They have time to sit and think. So use that as a role modeling opportunity.
All right, with my last 2 seconds, I'm just going to say, continue what you're doing, and then anchor it to the why, and then hold them accountable for the why. If you're going to tell them why it matters, then make it matter by assessing it, asking them to use it, make them do it, and then make them use it and apply it. I think you know, it's such a cool thing to see both didactic and clinical coming together in the next gen, and that's an opportunity for all of us to learn and do better.
Thank you all for joining. We really appreciate the engagement, the thoughts. I hope you leave today with some more food for thought, more food for self-reflection. But in the meantime, as Chris said, please keep doing what you're doing. We love that you're out there. And again, thank you. This is Dennis, Chris, and Maria signing off. We'll hope to see you soon in another one of these. Let us know what you're thinking, and see you soon.